Good morning. Today is Monday, September 8th, 2014. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. We're interviewing Joseph Carbonaro, a World War II veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Joe, for being here today and for participating in our project. Joe, where and when were you born?
I was born in New York City on August 21st, 1923.
And your parents, what did they do? What was their occupation?
My parents, as I initially remember them, my father and my mother both did interior decorating.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have three sisters.
What were their names?
My oldest sister's name was Domenica. My next sister was Angelina. And my last sister was Lelia. And I was born 13 years after my youngest sister.
Were any of them in the military?
No.
Okay. And what did you do before you entered the service?
Just before I entered the service, I worked in a company called Worthington Pump. We manufactured parts for the military. I was a turret lead operator.
Mm-hmm. What branch of the service were you in?
Initially, I went into the artillery.
In the Army?
In the
Part
Army.
of the Army. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
No, I was drafted.
You were drafted. What happened when you departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Well, really nothing special happened. We took a train out of Camp Upton, and I didn't know where we were going.
Where was Camp Upton and what?
That's in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's out on the east coast, on the east part of Long Island. And we got in the train. Actually, the train, all the shades were drawn. So I didn't know where we were going until we finally arrived in Texas.
How long did that take?
I don't really remember. I might have been 1 or 2 days.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any specialized training there at the camp?
No, not right off the bat.
So how long were you in the Texas training?
I don't remember exactly. It wasn't too long because I wanted to advance. I tried to apply to become an officer, but my intelligence scores were too low. So they says, would you want to take the test over? I says, of course. I says, when I took the test, when they give it to you when you first enlist, I was very nervous. So I took the test over. I owed double the score.
Wow.
And it was a very high score. Mm-hmm. She says, okay, you can go, but I just noticed that they have openings in the Air Corps. Says, all right, so you have to take some tests for that. So I took tests for that. I scored very high. There's a nice story there because in order to become an officer in the Air Corps, you had to be a natural-born citizen. You could not be, at that time, only natural-born citizens could be an officer in the Air Corps. So I sent for my birth certificate, and on my birth certificate, I found out that actually my name was Giuseppe Federico Carbonaro. So because of that, they says, you have to prove that you're Giuseppe Federico Carbonaro, because they knew me as Joseph Carbonaro. So I had to get testimonials from 3 people who knew me for at least 10 years, who swore that Giuseppe Federico Carbonaro and Joseph Carbonaro were one and the same. Now the reason that story is interesting because that took almost 2 weeks. It delayed. Once that was cleared, I was okay to go to be going to the Air Corps.
And how old were you then?
Oh, I think I was 20. When I got to the Air Corps, I went through the initial tests, and I failed 2 tests. One test was for my eyesight, and the other one was for my nose. Now, the funny thing about the eyesight was, when I went, you could have each failure reviewed by a doctor because the tests were given by medical corps, enlisted men. So the minute he saw the eye test, he says, forget about it. He says, you can see so close that you're not normal. He says, that's better than normal. He says, so that you pass the eye test. For the nose, when I went to the nose doctor, he says, well, you got a deviated septum. I said, so what? He says, they object that maybe you can't breathe right. I says, and you're going to fail me for that? He says, you really want to be in the Air Corps? I says, I want it so badly. He says, okay, tomorrow morning you go on sick call. Tell him you don't feel well and ask for me. So I did that. The minute I asked for him, he says, good, now I'm going to operate at you and fix your deviated septum. That put me back 2 more weeks. The reason I'm telling this as part of the story, because eventually that caused me to be dismissed from the Air Corps. Oh. And I cried like a baby when that happened. Because what happened was, because of the Battle of the Bulge, a directive came down that any Air Corps man who had not yet started to fly had to revert back to the ground forces. That came out on a Friday. My day to fly was Monday.
And you hadn't flown yet?
Monday was my day to fly.
The first time?
That would be when I'd get fly. Once I started to fly, I couldn't be sent back. But that never happened. What that did for me later on, maybe saved my life. It prevented me from ever becoming an officer.
So after the Air Corps?
I went back to the ground forces. And instead of sending me back to the artillery, at that time, because the general of the infantry, whenever he needed artillery fire, he would have to call up the artillery and ask for help. So the army, to help out the general and the infantry, they formed a cannon company, which would then be part of the infantry and did not have to answer to any other. When the general wanted artillery fire, he had his own cannon company, and I was put into that.
And where did you serve? In what?
When in the cannon company, I don't remember what camp I went back to then, but that would be in the 97. That would just be.
But you went abroad? You served?
No, that was here. It was from there that we went abroad.
To where?
Well, we landed in France. And we landed in France at about the time when Germany's was. This was right after the Battle of the Bulge.
What year was that, do you recall?
I have it written down. I don't recall it in memory, but I have it all. It's all in the discharge papers. Weren't they in the bag?
That's okay. We can move on. So you served abroad, and you were on the front lines?
No, we never got to the front lines because we were started to go after the Germans, but they were retreating so quickly that we couldn't catch up to them. Mm-hmm. And we went very quickly across France, through a couple of those small countries in between, through Germany very quickly, and finally, when we finally came to a stop, we were already in Austria.
So it must have been in the 40s, early.
It was 44, I think, 44 and 45.
Uh-huh. So what were your duties if you weren't on the front lines?
Well, at that time, first I was surveyor. In other words, I would survey the land so that they could determine what the distances were to aim the cannons. After that, since we were moving so fast, the next thing I became part of what we called a fire team. And we would be in a small tent, and information was relayed, and we did with trigonometry and other stuff. We would calculate how to elevate the cannons and how to aim them so we could direct fire.
It's a pretty important job.
Well, it would have been if we ever got to use it, but we couldn't get to use it because we had no chance to attack. So in that form, I was lucky. I never got to really get into the heat of the battle.
How long were you stationed abroad?
I think it was a little over a year.
Did you form nice camaraderie or friendships with the
we had
fellows?
we were very close. Once you're in a situation like that, we were very close. In that video that I showed you, you could see how close I was with all the things.
And you still kept in touch afterwards?
No, I did not. I feel terrible about that I just didn't follow through.
How did you stay in touch with your family when you were over there?
I would write letter every day. I would write a letter every day.
And what happened when you were with friends also? You communicated by letter with friends?
No,
It was family.
just family. Oh, a couple of personal friends I wrote a letter to now and then. I don't recall, though.
What did you do while you were over there when you were off duty for recreation?
Well, we really didn't do anything, but just rest. Of course, near the end, I finally became the head of the post exchange.
What is that?
That's where the soldiers could buy cigarettes. They could get their. They didn't buy. We used to give the cigarette allowance, their candy allowance. We would give whiskey out. If they would get hard liquor, and it would be very funny because if we got, let's say they allotted me 20 bottles of whiskey or liqueur, half went to the officers and half went to the enlisted men. And it always made me so angry because 5 officers got half of it and the other
Dozens.
the other 5 bottles went to over 100 men.
Wow.
I didn't drink, so I didn't care. In fact, while I was in the post exchange, I was everybody's best friend because I didn't smoke. So everybody was after for my rations.
So everybody had certain rations.
Well, I would, if we got a certain amount of cigarettes in, I would determine how much each soldier would get. If there was 100 cartons and there was 100 men, I'd give each man a carton. So naturally, my carton, I got their chocolate.
Do you remember where that was and what town?
Most of that took place in Czechoslovakia.
Oh, so you went from France?
From France to Germany, through Austria to Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
That's where I was when the war finally ended.
In Czechoslovakia?
Yes.
How did you, I guess it was by military transport?
Always by truck.
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 How many fellows in a group would travel like that?
Well, we would travel in a truck would be maybe, because the convoy would have about maybe 10 or 12 trucks. And maybe we would sit on the back of the trucks. And my favorite truck was the armored truck. And I think about that, that was crazy because here I would be sitting in the back of the truck and right next to the driver would be all the spare gasoline. There would be maybe 200 gallons of gasoline on that truck. And I would sit on the shells. The 105 shells were all loaded on the truck. So here I was sitting on a truck that had all this raw gas and all these shells. I never think anything of it.
Right.
Not only that, when you're that young, you have no fear. I remember having no fear at all.
Really? I was going to ask you if you, as you traveled across all these countries, did you feel safe? I mean,
Yeah.
wow.
Okay, once in a while we'd see the planes flying over, and then our guys would intercept, and they would never get near us. I remember the Germans used to shoot a lot of rockets. We used to call them the screaming memes. And our favorite thing was just listen to them. We would say, that's great, as long as we can hear them. It was the one you can't hear, you knew that you were in trouble.
Wow. Okay. What any other war remembrances that come to
there are
mind?
many of them.
I'm sure.
Many of them. I can tell one story when the convoy moved at night. We did not drive during the day. We would be undercover. We'd have things thrown over us so the overhead planes couldn't see us.
You mean the convoys always traveled at night?
Yes, and we would travel right one against each other. We'd only travel maybe 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour. 10 miles an hour would be fast, probably slower than that. So while we were in a truck one night, all of a sudden we veered off what seemed to be in a ditch. So the guy says, we're not moving. I'm not going to go out and try to get it because we can't get the heavy-duty truck to pull us out of the ditch till the morning. When we woke up in the morning, we were not on a ditch. We were on the edge of a cliff. We did not know it. Had the gun mechanic was sitting next to the driver. He was the guy who would fix the guns if the cannons, anything broke. Had he opened his door and stepped out, he would have went over the cliff. When we woke up in the morning, we said, oh, by the grace of God, we didn't go over with all that gas. And
how did they move the truck then?
and the next morning, the big, the repair truck came with the crane and he pulled us out.
Wow. Oh, it's a good thing you didn't see it at night. Wow, wow. How many people were on each truck?
Oh, sometimes 5, sometimes 6 people in the back of a truck. Mm-hmm. And each truck had thing. I was always in the lead truck, though.
So when you stopped for the night to sleep, you didn't set up a camp. You all just...
No, we drove to the night. We would sleep during the day. During the day.
Oh, you drove at night, right. But you didn't set up...
We couldn't move in the daytime. We would move at night.
At the daytime, you set up a camp, or you just stayed in the trucks?
No, we just stayed thinking. And the funny part of it is when the trucks would stop before daylight because the cooks and stuff who had the portable thing, they would cook in the dark.
Portable cooking
machine,
things?
Things they would cook in the dark.
How there was no light at all? I mean, how did they...
No, they maybe had a candle or something, searchlights, they cooked, and they prepared the meals. And I always used to tell my wife, because, that's the only meal we would really get would be that breakfast meal. The rest was K rations or stuff like that.
I see. Wow.
And I'm talking about having no fear. We used to have these little burners that were about, maybe at 6 inches high, that you could fill with gas and pump up, and you could cook stuff in that. And I used to cook on top of a crate of 105 ammunition. That's what I'm saying, having no fear.
Wow. Did everyone have their own little...
No, these little burners, no, there would be a few assigned here and there. They didn't belong to anybody in particular. But I always had one right nearby, because the guys knew that I loved to cook.
So you'd cook for yourself, but for others too?
Yeah, whatever was near me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did you maintain enough rations during the...
Oh, they always gave us a lot of rations, K rations and the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. How was the food?
They're dry and stuff like that. I think the C rations were better because those were the cans and stuff. Okay. K rations were dry.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice a difference between the countries as you were traveling? Did you know where you were?
I always tried to keep informed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One I remember most I liked being in was when we went to Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany. That was once the scene of the Olympics. That was that famous Olympics where Hitler made all those comments about the Negroes.
Did you stay in Garmisch? Or?
We stayed there about 2 or 3 days. But the beautiful part of there, while we stopped, we would hire the army had money that they could use to hire people to cook for us. So when we were in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, what they did with our rations, those cooks, we got pastries that we couldn't believe because they were expert cooks there, because that's a resort town. It still is to this day.
So using your rations, they beefed them up.
What our cooks had to work with, they cooked. What they did with the food, our cooks never could do.
Amazing. So now about coming home and the war's end. When did the war? Where were you when the war ended?
Well, I told you we were in Czechoslovakia.
Okay, and you heard pretty soon that it had.
Yeah, we heard that the Germans capitulated. They surrendered.
How did you get home? Or how long did it take you to get home from there?
I don't remember the exact amount of days, but things moved pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, they flew you out from there.
No flying.
No.
Not in those days. No. By train or truck, and then by boat across the country, by ship.
Oh, wow.
We went to Europe by ship in one of those convoys where there was hundreds and hundreds of ships side by side. They always traveled in huge convoys for 2 reasons. One, confuse the German subs. They wouldn't dare attack a convoy. And also the German subs never knew which ships had people on them. A lot of the ships went over empty.
Why?
To confuse them. They didn't want the Germans, so the Germans didn't know who to fire at.
Oh, I see.
They didn't want to waste their
I see.
stuff, I guess. I don't know what the ultimate reason why we went in convoys like that, but I know we always went in huge convoys.
So the ship you went on to go over there, how many soldiers do you think were on that?
Oh, there was hundreds.
Wow.
I think the whole division was on there.
How long did that take?
I don't remember exactly, but I have it all documented.
So you left from New York Harbor?
Yes, we left from New York, and we arrived at Le Havre, France.
Okay. How was it when you came home, back to the war's end and coming home?
We came home again by ship.
By ship. And how were you received by family and the community? How was it?
My mother and father were very happy to see me.
You weren't married at that point?
No.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel readjusting to civilian life?
Well, I tried to go back to my old job because they had to give it back to you. So I did go back to my old job. But I only stayed there for a very short while because I realized it was crazy to travel. It took me 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to come home. I kept saying 4 hours a day, to which I don't get no pay for. So I said, I got to try something else. So I got a job as a installer for sewing machines. I installed industrial sewing machines.
In what facilities?
I worked for a company that sold sewing machines. And garment factories bought sewing machines, and they needed someone to install the machines so that it worked.
How did you know how to do that?
They taught me. They knew I was mechanically inclined, so they taught me.
And how long did you work for them?
I worked for them maybe about a year because then I decided I didn't want to do that for a living. I wanted to learn electronics. So I then went to RCA Institute, and with the government Bill of Rights, and I became an electronics technician, and I started to repair television.
Oh, I see.
And that's what I did for most of my life.
Now, did you stay in contact with any of the veterans? You said
No.
you didn't use,
No, I did not.
And are you a member of any veterans organizations currently?
I
Were
joined the
you?
VFW, and then I'm not presently a member, no.
So after your time with the televisions, was that what you've done most of your career?
That's what I did. After that, nothing.
How do you feel your wartime experiences affected your life?
Well, as far as being just a memory, I don't think they actually affect what actually happened. I might have done different things had there been no war, but that's hard to determine.
Right. Did you learn some life lessons from the military service?
Yeah, be glad you're alive.
Yeah, yeah. Has the military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I like as I reflect back at my military life, I think it was a good experience. I have no regret. I'm glad I was in the Army. It was really nice. It did teach you a lot of disciplines.
Did you lose some friends?
Did I lose friends because I went in the service?
No.
Did any of my friends die?
Yeah.
No. No, luckily, no. I lost nobody in the war.
If you could leave a message to future generations who would hear this interview, what kind of message would that be? Either about what you learned in the military or what it was like or signing up with the military, anything related to that?
Well, I would tell them the same thing that I eventually told myself. You're in a situation, whether you like it or not, you've just got to make the best of it. Don't think of the bad things that happen, but just think of what good could come out of it.
Were you afraid?
No, I told you that at that age I had no fear at all.
And most of the
I was not afraid. I never entered my mind that I might, die.
really.
No, it might have been in my mother and father's thought, but not in mine. I was sure everything was going to come out good.
You think most soldiers at that time who served with you had similar feelings?
I think a good part of them felt the same way. There was always a few that were afraid. You could always tell. But most of the people I knew were not afraid.
Is there anything you feel we haven't discussed that you'd like to add to our discussion?
Oh, I like to tell a story about like when I did the video I showed you about handle with care about the 105 shells, that actually how safe they are.
What exactly are those?
A 105 shell when it hits on impact, it's a terrible explosion. They really do a lot of damage. But the shell itself can be handled safely. In fact, I once did I prepared a discussion for the group of the troops, because as a non-com, you had to teach your other troops how to do certain things. That you could take a 105 shell and get a hammer and hit it right on the nose and nothing would happen. Because in order for a 105 shell to explode, certain things have to happen. First, it has to be hit from behind. That's when you pull the lanyard and the shell goes off. The second thing that has to happen, the shell has to revolve. If the shell doesn't revolve quickly, all the train of explosives that are built within do not take shape. Once it's hit from behind, and then it spins in the air, then it's armed. Then if it hits anything, it'll explode.
How is it fired? From what? From a gun or a...
No, from the cannon.
Cannon.
You load it from behind. That's another story about the cannon. They say people, you slept so hard you could sleep through cannon fire as a joke. Let me tell you, it's not a joke. One night, we were assigned during a war game while we were still in the United States. And me and my best friend in the Army, we were assigned as a skeleton crew. We manned one howitzer by ourselves in the middle of the night.
No, but this was in the United States,
In
you
the
said?
United
So
States.
during your training period?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
This was during the war games that we were participating, so that we could know how to work. So we prepared the cannon, and the cannon has trailways that you open up, and the cannon sits in the middle. And you open up the back to load the cannon thing. So we had one shell, and we knew that we were going to get one fire order during the night. So I took the first watch, and Merle, just my best friend at the time, he stood there, and while I watched it, he just laid down and rested. After a while, after 8 hours had passed, I says, "Okay, Merle, it's your turn now." He says, "All right." I says, "You're going to lay down." So I laid down between the trailways, and he says, "Joe, let's load the howitzer now in case what they call us for a fire order. We'll be ready to go." I said, "Okay." So I laid down between the trailways, and I fell asleep. When morning came, I says, "Merle, what the heck happened? We never got the fire order? They never called us." I said, "What a waste." He says, "No, we got the fire order." He says, "Why didn't you wake me?" I said, "Why should I wake you? I just pulled the line yet." You fired the cannon while I was asleep? In other words, here's the trailways like this, and I'm laying in between, and here's the cannon. I never woke up. So
Wow.
you can sleep through cannon fire.
Amazing. I hope it didn't injure your hearing at all.
I don't remember anything about it. I just know the shell was... He opened up the breech, and he says, "Yeah, the shell's gone."
Amazing. Anything else you'd like to add? It's fascinating. Your stories are fascinating.
I just can't remember offhand. There are a lot of things that happened, you know.
How soon after you returned did you meet your wife?
I would say about 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you didn't know her while you were in the
No,
military?
I didn't know her. I met her later on. The one girl that I really knew before I went to young, I thought I was so much in love. I received the traditional Dear John.
Oh. While you were over there?
Oh, yeah. While I was in Camp Swift, Texas, I got my dear. I remember her name was Eleanor.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to add? Are we good?
No, not offhand that I can think of.
Okay. Thank you so much.